Misconceptions about red meat are leaving thousands of Britons at risk of health problems caused by nutritional deficiencies. The Meat Advisory Panel has conducted research with 2,000 meat eaters to gain insight into people's understanding of red meat and nutrients. The survey confirms that Britons have a hearty appetite for red meat, and most are aware of its importance as part of a healthy diet, but it has exposed some glaring gaps in our nutrition knowledge. Dr. Carrie Ruxton and Professor Robert Pickard explain more about the survey results and the important role red meat has to play in our diets.
Well, misconceptions about red meat and nutrients could mean that people are putting their health at risk. So we wanted to conduct a survey to find out what people's attitudes and knowledge was about red meat today and its role in the diet. The survey showed that people often don't understand about nutrients and where to find them in the diet. For example, nearly half thought that spinach was a better source of iron than red meat, and 1 in 20 thought that green leafy vegetables were a source of vitamin D, and 1 in 10 thought that citrus fruits were a source of vitamin D, when in fact they don't have any vitamin D in them at all. In fact, only 12% of people correctly identified red meat as a good source of vitamin D.
I think one of the surprises was that not everyone immediately thought of lamb and pork as being examples of red meat. Most people tended to think that red meat was synonymous really with beef, whereas of course that's not the case. I don't think people really do understand the true value of red meat in the diet, but 2 out of every 3 people in our survey realised that red meat was an important part of the human diet. Vitamins are particularly important because they're usually molecules that we can't make ourselves, and in most cases we need to obtain them from our diet, and so it's very important to make sure that you do get all of them from one food or the other.
Iron is really important, and in fact women need twice as much iron as men in the diet, and they often don't realise that.
It's the mineral that we need, or the element that we need to build into haemoglobin so that haemoglobin can carry oxygen.
Low iron or iron deficiency anemia can produce a lot of niggling health problems such as tiredness and fatigue and headaches, so we really want to make sure that women understand about iron and get enough of it in their diets. Red meat is one of the best sources of iron in the diet, and it contains a type of iron that's very readily absorbed by the body. So it's really good for people to include red meat regularly in their diet, and that would include beef, pork and lamb.
Vitamin D is absolutely important for the maintenance of the integrity of the bones, along with many other things. One of the problems of making vitamin D naturally is that you have to expose your skin to sunlight. Some people have pigmented skins and they come from sunnier climates originally, and therefore they will not get a lot of sunshine in the United Kingdom passing through their skin to make it easy for them to build vitamin D. Because we live in a cold environment, we tend to cover up for 6 months of the year, if not 8 months of the year, and so we don't expose our skin to sufficient sunlight. So it's very important to have a source of vitamin D actually in the diet. It's important for people to realise that farmers and animal breeders have made great efforts over the last few years to develop animals that produce much leaner cuts of meat. So the fat has been very significantly reduced. But it's equally important not to simply regard fat as a source of energy, because fat is much more important than that. Fat is required structurally. Every cell in the human body is composed of fat and protein. So fat is also structurally important.
Red meat nowadays is a healthy choice, and if you compare it with something like chicken, for example, a chicken breast with the skin on actually contains more fat than a piece of lean pork.
The key thing that's wrong, that is a misconception, is that if you mention vitamins and minerals to the average person in the street, they probably would immediately think of lettuce or asparagus or something like that. And yet red meat is the richest source of all the vitamins and minerals. It's really nutrient dense. That's why you don't need large quantities. Even where it exists in vegetable material, it's very difficult for us to extract it sometimes, as in the case of iron. You need a pile of spinach this high to extract a daily dose of iron, whereas you need only a couple of ounces of red meat. Contrary to what we often think when we talk to our children, it's not the path that we choose in life that determines our health and our happiness. It's the way that we walk it. And to walk properly, you have to be balanced. And there's no doubt in my mind that because red meat is such a rich source of vitamins, minerals and proteins, that it makes a really incredible contribution to the building of a balanced diet and gives you a firm foundation to make sure that you do get a little bit of everything that you need. People need to look after and take responsibility for their own health. And they can only do that if they're properly informed about what vitamins and what nutrients are present in the different foods. The very best diet is to eat a little bit of everything and not too much of any one thing. That's very important. The second thing to note is that red meat is the most nutritious food that you have available to you in a balanced diet. It's so nutritious that you absorb every molecule that you get. That's one of the reasons that we can see that man is not naturally a vegetarian, because he doesn't have any means of chemically absorbing cellulose or degrading cellulose, the most common constituent of plants.
It is important consumers do recognise the contribution that red meat can make to a healthy, balanced diet. For further information about the research, visit www.meatmatters.com.